Hello! I just finished a big ass painting. It took a long ass time, so I thought I would explain how I came up with it and some of the context behind it. Before I get started, I just want to say I don't know what I'm doing 99% of the time. So take everything I say with a fat grain of salt and do what works for you. Okay, moving on. So I usually approach new pieces with a concept in mind. So it's usually just like a general vague idea of what I want to paint that can be distilled down into like a word or two. So for this one, it was cultural disconnection. This one, it was gratitude. For this one, it was the arbitrariness of beauty standards. So how do I come up with these concepts, you might ask? Well, after doing art for a while, I feel like I kind of approach life with like an artistic eye. So I kind of just look at everything and I'm like, can I make a painting out of that? In order to draw inspiration from your everyday life, you kind of have to be actively looking for it, be receptive to noticing and appreciating the little things. You just gotta keep your eye out for Selena. Okay, so now for coming up with the actual composition. Usually it is so strange, but my ideas come to me when I'm in the shower or about to fall asleep. And it doesn't just like land on me. I usually have to force myself to be like, okay, now I'm going to think and come up with something. I know it's kind of sad that I force myself to be productive, literally even in the shower, but I've accepted I'm a capitalist sheep. It is too late for me. Okay, this is gonna sound really dumb, but I just like think really hard. I just try to concentrate on like the symbols or the themes that I want to incorporate. Then if I'm lucky, an image will kind of come together. So after I come up with an image, I make a very rough sketch to just like jot down my thoughts so I don't forget them. This is what the culture gap rough sketch looked like. As you can see, it's very ugly. I kind of just jot down like notes and stuff to like brain dump pretty much. If I don't have access to a sketchbook, I'll sometimes just draw something with my finger in my notes app, like this. Still very ugly. At this point, once I have the basic layout and elements mapped out, I start gathering references. This is actually a really great place to kind of explore more, especially if you're doing like research into a piece. Sometimes if you let the research guide you, it can give you new ideas and expand your horizons. I try to take as many of my own reference photos as I can, and then the rest I just use Google or Pinterest. So for Culture Gap, I took selfies of myself going like this. I'm not gonna put photos because it's just too embarrassing. I'm trying to preserve my last shred of dignity. Then I tore up a piece of paper and took photos. Then I took a bunch of photos of a plastic bag hanging off of my arm. I didn't have any persimmons on me, so I took photos of an apple just to get like the lighting right in the shadows. Then I looked up a bunch of examples of Chinese brush paintings and a bunch of crane photos, a bunch of eagle photos, a bunch of persimmon photos, and I used a bunch of calligraphy generators to help me with this part. And then finally, I'll make a rendered sketch that's pretty close to what my final piece will look like. This is what the sketch for Culture Gap looked like. I spilled some water on it, that's why it's a little crusty. Also something to keep in mind, I like making the final sketch the same dimensions as the final painting. So this painting is 36 by 48 and this sketchbook is 9 by 12. So both of them have a ratio of 3 to 4. Quick maths. And then I just paint. I think of a general color scheme when I'm planning the composition, but other than that, I kind of just work out the details as I go. Sometimes I have long periods of time where I literally can't think of anything, and it's frustrating, but I've kind of accepted it as part of the process. The idea for this painting actually came after a long period of art constipation. I realized that you can't really force yourself to be creative, so just carry on with your life and be open to receiving ideas when they come. I will say, my paintings are usually not this complex or thought through, so this is a bit of an outlier. Something I highly recommend that changed the game for me is working big. Getting bigger canvases really changed the way I approach creating compositions because the space for imagination like physically expands. I know it can be intimidating and expensive, but even just sizing up a little bit, like going from 16 by 20s to 18 by 24s makes a big difference. Okay, so now I thought I would explain the painting in more depth and break down the different elements. I wanted to merge a traditional Chinese brush painting style with my acrylic style to convey a dichotomy between my Chinese and American identities. By the way, except for the black outlines, all this stuff isn't actually ink, it's just watered down acrylic. I wanted to juxtapose the flatter elements with the 3D elements, but still have them interact, so it's like a sense of being out of place but still entangled. And I deliberately tried to make it busy, and so there's not really a place to rest your eyes because like chaos and stuff. Okay, so the image of the brush painting part, like the mountains, that came from the deep recesses of my memory. So when I was 7, I would draw this same frickin' waterfall and mountains all the time. I swear. I could not tell you why. There's definitely more. This is just all that I could find. I really don't know what was wrong with me. Was I possessed? It's clearly not the same, but that was just kind of the vibe I wanted to channel. This is me. I was trying to convey desperation and angst, like a whole screaming into the void kind of thing. Red crown cranes are really prominent in Chinese culture, and they symbolize longevity and immortality. So I chose them to represent my Chinese identity. And then the eagle, kind of obvious, but it's like America. And I wanted it to obstruct the flight path of the cranes. But the cranes are also significant to me because I drew a picture of cranes for my grandpa's 80th birthday, and that was in 2014 when I was 10 years old, and that was the last time that I went to China. So the cranes are tied to the last time I visited the motherland and the time in my life that I felt most Chinese. So not only does all of this represent the conflict between the opposing forces of my identity, but also the loss of my linguistic identity. I'm a Chinese school dropout, so it's like I try to speak Mandarin, but I cannot. So with the Chinatown plastic bags and the fortune cookie fortune, I wanted to convey how my experience of Chinese culture is like distilled down into this commodified American refraction, and how it's like cheapened and inauthentic. So I hung the plastic bags on the tree to like create a disturbance in the pristine environment. But at the same time, all of these things do have significance to me and positive memories associated with them, like eating at Chinese restaurants, or the plastic bag drawer. If you know, you know. Okay, so the persimmons. I love persimmons. They're native to China, so eating them kind of feels like an act of connecting with my heritage. But last year I read a poem. It's really good. It's one of my favorites by Lee Young Lee called Persimmons. And one of the stanzas goes,
Mrs. Walker brought a persimmon to class and cut it up so everyone could taste a Chinese apple. Knowing it wasn't ripe or sweet, I didn't eat, but watched the other faces.
So basically, Mrs. Walker is the white 6th grade teacher, and she's very culturally insensitive, and it shows even in her syntax. Like, she refers to the persimmon as a Chinese apple. Like, she can only evaluate Chinese culture within an American framework. Anyway, not to get all AP English literature, my mom eats persimmons the Chinese way, or so she says. Basically, she waits for it to get soft and then eats it with a spoon. But I, on the other hand, like my persimmons slightly underripe, and then I cut them up into pieces like frickin' Mrs. Walker. So when I read the poem, I was like, shit, here's this thing that I thought was connecting me to my culture, but psych bitch, I'm doing it wrong. So the calligraphy says 不知道, and that means I don't know. And I put it there because I do not know. But I also kind of wanted to poke fun at those white people who aestheticize Chinese characters, and then they'll get tattoos that say like, well, the 屁股很大, and be like, this means prosperity and harmony.
By the way, what it really means is, I got a fat ass.
And finally, this here is supposed to be a stylized version of my name, Liu Shenling. So a bunch of people in China have these personal name seals that they use instead of signatures on like art and documents and stuff. And my dad actually got me one from China a long time ago. And I remembered about it when I was coming up with the composition for this painting, and I got really excited because I wanted to use it, and so I went to look for it and I couldn't find it. Then I realized that I probably threw it out like 2 years ago when I was Marie Kondoing my room, and that was sad because I disposed of all the things that I deemed no longer important. I was like, damn, I'm really out here colonizing myself. So for this, I had to use an online Chinese name seal generator, and then I painted it on. I was like, wow, this is so meta. Me colliding with my cultural disconnection when I'm trying to make a painting about my cultural disconnection. Nice. So that is all I have for you today. I'm sorry if this was a mess. I'm new to this YouTube thing, and I do not know what the heck I am doing. I feel like to be a good YouTuber, you have to have a niche or personality, and also self-confidence, and I have D, none of the above. Anyway, like this video if you want, comment if you want, subscribe if you want, etc. Hey yo, shout out to my first subscriber, Steve. Thanks, King. Okay, bye!